Guys, let me tell you something. Mainstream media is losing. CNN is losing. MSNBC is losing. Fox News is kind of losing, right, as well. But guys, they know they're losing. They know that alt media, right, YouTube personalities like myself, radio, podcasts, all these other alternative forms of media are kicking their ass. And they are scared ishless. I'm telling you. In the conversation you're going to see that's going to happen over the next probably 3 or 4 years from mainstream media is going to center around the role of big tech in censorship. Because networks like CNN are going to try to use the Achilles heel of big tech. Mainly these social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, etc., TikTok. They're going to try to use the Achilles heel of these companies to pressure them into silencing alternative media. And in particular, right now, they're targeting the conservatives. That's what's happening. So mainstream media is going to try to say, hey, Facebook, hey, Instagram, hey, Twitter, hey, Google. Listen, you guys might want to start censoring these alt media conservatives that we think are extremists, or else we're going to start telling people, the masses, that you guys are contributing to this problem and that you won't clean it up. Because the reality is, for these social media companies, is that their Achilles heel is the algorithm. And that's the game that's being played here, guys. It's all about the money. CNN knows that alt media like me is a threat to the money. So they're trying to use big tech to fight their battle for them. That's what they're trying to do. But before we get into that, my name is Greg Foreman, and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share A Black Conservative Perspective, aka a leftist worst nightmare. You can also follow me on Twitter at GForemanBCP. Let's get it. All right, guys. So I want you to pay attention to this interview between Brian Seltzer of CNN and Alex Amos, a former Facebook insider, in which they're talking about the role of big tech and how companies like CNN want big tech to censor conservatives. Okay? They're just flat out telling people that. And guys, it is important to understand that the media is pushing this narrative. They're driving the censorship forward. Okay? And because of that, this is probably the most important conversation to pay attention to for the next 3 to 4 years, because this is just the beginning. So it's super important that conservative voices like myself and others pay attention to this conversation and fight back. So let's go ahead and get into this video, and I will pause it when I need to interject my opinion.
Information crisis that has been perpetuated, in my view, by platforms like the one where I used to work, Facebook, as well as Twitter and others.
All right, so pay attention to the question here. What he's saying is that how much responsibility does platforms like Facebook and Twitter and big tech take for what is currently happening? It's a loaded question to try to frame the conversation around big tech needs to fix this. Let's talk about how you're going to do it.
It's really hard, because what's happening is people are able to seek out the information that makes them feel good. That is what's happening, is that people have so much choice now. They can choose what their news sources are. They can choose what influencers they want to follow.
What he's talking about here is the algorithm. And this is why I said that the algorithm is the Achilles heel of big tech, particularly these social media companies. And the fact that the algorithm, at the very least, contributes, if not drives, the polarization of our political spectrum is the heart of what CNN is trying to get at here. They're trying to create the narrative that big tech is responsible for fixing this problem.
And they can try to seal out anything that helps them question that. And I think that gets to a really core issue with how our freedoms as Americans and the way we've treated press freedom in the past is being abused by these actors. In that we have given a lot of leeway, both in the traditional media and on social media, to people to have a very broad range of political views. And it is now.
Well, if people have a broad range of political views, what's wrong with that? Is the left not the party of diversity? But see, this is not surprising to me because I already knew that the left was never the party of diverse opinions. They are the party of diverse skin colors, not diverse ideas.
Now in the great economic interest of those individuals to become more and more radical. And I think that one of the places you can see this is on the fact that you now have competitors to Fox News on their right, OANN and Newsmax, which are carried by all the major cable networks.
And again, you see how he's framing this? He's framing it as if it only happens on the right. Doesn't networks on the left like TYT exist because MSNBC is not left enough for the progressives? So is this same kind of extremism that you're pointing out here not happening on both sides when it comes to media? There's so many people on the left in the media. The left is backed by corporate America. The left basically owns the media for the most part because the left put cancel culture into overdrive to the point where corporations are like, well, we got to be woke to make money, and being woke makes us money, so we're going to be woke. So really, I mean, what he's talking about is a function of capitalism, and all the money is on the left. Guys, look at all these corporations backing Black Lives Matter. What corporations are backing the Proud Boys? And I know, leftists will be like, what are you doing? How can you compare Black Lives Matter to the Proud Boys? The Proud Boys are right-wing extremists, racist, neo-Nazis. However, Black Lives Matter, they're fighting for black lives. Okay? That's what the leftists would say. And I would say, take the extreme part of the Proud Boys, the most extreme Proud Boy you can find, and take the most extreme portion of BLM. How many cities has the extreme version of the Proud Boys burned down in comparison to the extreme version of Black Lives Matter? That is the counter argument that I would make. So when the left try to say, oh, no, you can't compare the two. No. What the left conveniently leaves out is that we've seen what the most extreme version of Black Lives Matter can be. And that extreme results in massive economic damage to this country. And it results in lives lost across the country. But you never see that narrative from the mainstream media because it's profitable to be woke. All that anger that's in the streets from police brutality, all that anger is used to make Nike more money. To make all these companies that push wokeness more money. That's all it is. And all these celebrities, they're just bought and paid for by the companies to push that narrative. The media pushes it. Everybody pushes that same narrative that is profitable for them. And they do that by drowning out conservative voices. That's the game. And CNN, ironically, is playing this game. They don't want to acknowledge they're playing the game, but them censoring conservative voices, like mine's, voices that they define as alt media, they think is going to help them get their audience back. However, the problem with CNN is the fact that they don't even realize that their own ish stinks. And until they realize that, they will never be able to beat alternative media like me and other people in this space.
Trying to now outflank Fox on the right because the moment Fox introduced any kind of realism into their reporting, immediately a bunch of people chose to put themselves into a sealed ecosystem. And they can do that both on cable, they can do it online. And that becomes a huge challenge of figuring out how do you bring those people back into the mainstream of fact-based reporting and try to get us all back into the same consensual reality.
All right. So basically what he's saying is that how do we get people back to a consensual reality? I mean, does this man not understand that there's no such thing as a consensual reality because people grow up and live in different circumstances that give them different views on life and how reality works for them? But these airheads on CNN can't grasp the concept that somebody sees the world differently than they do. Right? They live in their little East Coast elitist bubbles where they all chatter among each other and share their super liberal ideas and beliefs. But yet they never take time to consider the beliefs of those who they don't necessarily agree with, like people on the right, like, you know, the people in the Midwest, the people in the South. What are their viewpoints? Why do they feel the way they feel? Why do they feel the need to run to a platform like Parler or to Rumble? And why is it that CNN is calling for more censorship, which ultimately is pushing them to those platforms? CNN is trying to frame this problem as something that must be solved by censoring conservative voices. And CNN knows that this just leads to a domino effect. The more censorship, the more extremism. The more extremism, the more censorship to further justify the extremism. And CNN wants it to get to the point where any kind of conservative speech is classified as extreme. That is the goal. That is how you eliminate the alt media competition. And throughout this whole interview, they're going to try their best to associate the right with being extreme.
And can you? Is that possible? Seems like that's an open question.
It's hard. I mean, I think we got to do a couple things. One, there needs to be an intentional work by the social media companies collaborating together to work on violent extremism in the same way they worked on ISIS. When I started at Facebook in 2015, the #1 challenge from a content perspective was the abuse of social media by the Islamic State. And there was a collaboration between the tech companies and between the tech companies and law enforcement to make it impossible for them to use the internet to recruit and radicalize mostly young Muslim men at the time around the world.
All right, so you hear this. This guy is saying that we must censor conservatives the same way that we censor ISIS. The Islamic State, guys. This is what this man has said. This is how framing happens through the media. This is how they make the masses believe and associate certain ideologies with certain things. He's literally trying to associate ISIS with being a conservative. If you're a conservative, then we got to treat you the same way we treat ISIS. Guys, this is what's happening. And this is why I have to tell people that I pay attention to all media, including the mainstream media, because we have to fight against these narratives. These are narratives that we have to fight back against directly. We cannot let these people freely push this narrative that the right is like ISIS, okay, to a group of people, to the masses, unobstructed, with no dissenting opinion, without trying to get our opinion into that conversation. Because that's going to leave a large amount of people to believe that any conservative voice is a dangerous threat to society. That conservatism is a dangerous threat to society. So this is why we can't just run to other platforms and say, oh no, we don't need to be on Twitter. We don't need to be on Facebook. We don't need to be on... No, we need to fight to be on those platforms, and we can still have those other alternative platforms as well. However, we need to fight to be on the mainstream platform because our voices need to be heard by other people. We need to make our opinions heard on the other side. We have to, because otherwise, look at the narrative that they're pushing, guys. You think this is going to end up good for us? This is what they want to happen. They want to censor conservatives to the point where they can only associate conservative speech with extremism. This is how the war on public opinion works. They don't want our voices in the mainstream conversation. That's the trick here. And what the leftists that are cheering this on don't realize is that this is just setting the precedent that in the future, big tech, social media, the mainstream media can call for a certain group of people or a certain type of speech or a certain viewpoint to be censored if they define it as a threat to society. If they find it potentially harmful and dangerous to society, they can shut you up. And this is something that can be applied to both sides. But as of right now, it's mainly being applied to the right. So the left is agreeing with it, not realizing that this same weapon can and will be used on you once you fall out of favor with the money. And this is why we have to push back against censorship.
Now we're talking about domestic audience in the United States. And the challenge is going to be partially that ISIS did not have a domestic constituency in the United States Congress, but there is over half of the Republicans in Congress voted to overturn the election, and there will be a continual political pressure on the companies to not take it seriously. So I think first you have to focus on those violent extremists, and those companies have to be brave in that way. And second, we have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences. There are people.
Bam. That's a direct shot at me, man. I took that personally. We have to tone down the reach of conservative influencers. They're just telling you straight up what they want to do. He didn't say extreme conservative viewpoints that align with certain conspiracy theories. No, they didn't say none of that. They said conservative influencers. We have to tone down the reach of conservative influencers. That's what this man's actively calling for. But little does he know, who's supposed to be a Facebook insider, that my reach is already turned down. So he's probably calling for more turn down of conservative reach. So they're just telling you straight up. And this is where we're at right now. So it's important that we recognize this.
People on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN, and they are extremely radical and pushing extremely radical views.
And see, there we go. Money talks. Alt media is winning. There's people on the internet that are completely independent that have larger audiences than daytime CNN. How crazy is that? That lets you know we're winning. You know why? Because we have a diversity of opinions. We allow the diversity of ideas to thrive. And CNN, on the other hand, who won't even cover the Hunter Biden story, which is embarrassing because they called it a conspiracy theory. But CNN wants to lecture alt media about fact-based reporting when that story was covered by alt media. Wasn't covered by CNN, and that was a legitimate story. The son of who is going to be a sitting president may be having some illegal business dealings with China that could possibly have influence in this country because his son was basically caught selling influence in Ukraine. This is something that it should at least be covered, and CNN decided not to cover it, but yet they're trying to lecture people about fact-based reporting. And that's why I say CNN won't acknowledge that their own ish stinks. They won't do it. The goal right now is to put the responsibility on big tech and everybody else. That's what CNN is trying to do. They're trying to use big tech and these telecommunications companies to fight their battle.
And so it's up to the Facebooks and YouTubes in particular to think about whether or not they want to be effectively cable networks for disinformation. And then we're going to have to figure out the OANN and Newsmax problem.
Bro, the framing from this guy, I mean, listen to how he's talking about this. He's saying they're going to have to figure out, the Facebooks and the YouTubes, do they want to be cable networks for disinformation? Like, just listen to that framing, man. He's saying that, listen, if you don't carry a certain narrative, then you are a network for disinformation. If you don't push our point of view, then you are a network for disinformation. You know what? YouTube has already bought into it because they already tell you we promote most of our news stories through the mainstream news, the news that we categorize as legit, authoritative. They're already doing it. This man is calling for even more of it. And look where we're at. We already have censorship. Only thing it's done is create more extremism, which CNN knows, because that's the way they're going to try to get rid of conservative speech. That's the way they're going to try to do it.
These companies have freedom of speech, but I'm not sure we need Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and such to be bringing them into tens of millions of homes.
He's calling for the telecommunication companies to cut them off, cut off conservatives. That's what he's calling for. This type of rhetoric, guys, is important. This conversation is important.
This is allowing people to seek out information if they really want to, but not pushing it into their faces, I think, is where we're going to have to go here.
Alex and Chris, thank you both.
All right, guys, so there you have it. CNN recognizes that they are losing the battle, right? They know that alt media is a threat. So CNN has to go out of their way to try to brainwash the masses into thinking that conservatives are all extremists. All conservatives are extremists. That's how they try to get rid of their competition. Okay? So I think it's important, guys, moving forward to pay attention to this narrative. And we have to start responding directly to this narrative and fight against it, because we are in the war of public opinion. We're trying to get people to come to our side. Okay? That's how you ultimately ended up winning. So that means that we need to try our best to be a part of the conversation. You don't want to exit yourself out of the conversation, because otherwise we're doomed to be censored, to no voice. That's what's going to happen. And I'm going to try my best to make sure that my voice is heard in this conversation, and that we fight this narrative directly and take it on and dismiss this myth that conservatives are extremists. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.